Our culture has declined so far, so fast, that we don't even recognize sexual grooming of children when it's right in front of our faces. And who's putting it there? Public schools, teachers, counselors. You know, the good guys who care about kids. This week we'll expose one of the pornographic comic books being stocked in an American public school library for children's reading pleasure. Then we'll go through just one national public radio show to illustrate the network's obsessive fixation on all things race. The host and guests of color want us to believe they only want fair treatment of black employees. Their own words reveal the lie. Welcome to Disaffected. I'm Joshua Slocum, and this is the show where we talk about politics, culture, and relationships through a psychological lens. We've got a lot of serious stuff to talk about this week. It's not going to be quite as lighthearted and funny as it's been for the last couple of episodes. Quick housekeeping. I said last week mistakenly that Sanjay Gupta of CNN was a former Surgeon General. I had a brain malfunction. He was never a Surgeon General, so I don't know where that came from, but thanks for correcting me, guys. I do appreciate it. On past episodes, I have shared with you some of the communications I've gotten from work colleagues, people who are friends and work colleagues, and how the personal has bled into the professional despite my attempts to keep reasonable boundaries between my professional life and my personal life. Well, that got ratcheted up this week. Excuse me. I have another letter that I want to read to you that I got from a colleague about Thanksgiving. This is someone who is a friend of mine, has been for 20 years, somebody I met through work, somebody who was a former supervisor that I answered to, and someone who's become a friend that I travel to and often stay with at the Christmas holiday for a night so that we can see each other when I'm passing through on the way to family. So I wrote her and I said, I'll be doing my usual trip through upstate New York. Will you be around? If so, I would love to have a meal with you because it's been a long time since we've seen each other. That's your setup, and I'll start reading you the correspondence. She writes, "Hi again. I have no plans yet for Christmas, and I'm hoping not to have to travel. I've recently recovered from a severe respiratory infection that laid me low in September and part of October. I apparently caught it after a vacation in August. No more of that. It acted like COVID, but it wasn't. I trust you got vaccinated if you are out doing talks. I'd be glad to see you if you are. It's been a long time. I'll keep you posted about December 23, 24. So I responded. People have to set their own boundaries. This woman set a boundary. I may not agree with it, but she doesn't have to have anybody in her house that she doesn't want to have in her house. So this is what I wrote. Hi, Sandra. A Christmas without travel sounds lovely. Enjoy it. I'm glad to know that you're on the mend, and I'm sorry to hear you were laid low. I'm sorry we'll have to miss each other over Christmas, but I've made a decision not to take this vaccine at this time. But I'll be thinking of you and hope you have a cozy time and a wonderful holiday. Love, Josh." Well, sure enough, I got a response about a week later. Here it is. "Dear Josh, I keep aching to respond to your unvaccinated status. Then I say to myself, not my problem. Yet I feel badly as a friend saying, no, don't come, but I am adamant that this 87-year-old asthmatic should not host an unprotected person. This is how I view it. The virus is everywhere in my city. We're still having 100+ new cases a day, as well as daily deaths. My brother had polio, and I went to grade school with a girl whose legs were encased in metal braces, and she clanked with every motion. My mother-in-law died at 57 because she believed prayer would cure her headache. It was meningitis. So I think Western medicine is wonderful. Beyond that, in the COVID response, I firmly insist that we return to respecting our neighbors. Public health is not a personal choice, it is a duty. And as the face of an organization, were I a board member, I would move the question that our representative go forth in public fully vaccinated, especially to our member chapters. Aren't you glad I'm not on the board? I don't know your reasons, but now you know mine. This is more than enough. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. I didn't respond, and I'm not going to respond. But if I were going to respond, this is what I would say. You forget yourself, madam. You forget yourself. You crossed a line with me that you cannot uncross. And that's all I have to say about that. You guys. Etiquette doesn't work. Politeness doesn't work. Boundaries don't work. People who are captured by this mind-altering ideology are simply not responding to normal social cues anymore. We're all learning things about people we wish we didn't know, aren't we? Now, let's talk about gender. Trolling through social media, I came across this delightful little animation from, of all places, Kraft Foods, Kraft peanut butter. Take a look at this. There's no sound for those of you here on audio. This is a cutesy little cartoon. It's an animated GIF or GIF. I don't know which it is. But it says, for Trans Awareness Week, Crunchy and Smoothie want to learn about pronouns with you. Who are Crunchy and Smoothie? The little Kraft peanut butter bears, of course. Blink, blink. Oh, if anybody had told me 20 years ago that I'd be sitting here and saying to you, as a gay man, yes, they are coming for your children, because they are. Watch your macaroni and cheese boxes. We're going to get into what's going on in our public schools with gender. "20 years ago or more, I was a crime and cops reporter at a newspaper in Virginia. That was my first career that I started out in before I moved over to the nonprofit sector. And I was assigned to cover a conference that was being put on by the county sheriff's department, their sex crimes response unit, child sex crimes. And they were debating what was then a new piece of congressional legislation. I believe it was called the Children's Online Protection Act. And part of this law, if I'm remembering it correctly, I may be getting a detail missing about the legislation here, but part of this law that was controversial was the fact that drawn images and cartoons were being treated as the same as photographed depictions of actual child sexual abuse. And in those days, I thought that was outrageous. I thought these people were a bunch of Puritans who wanted to get into people's personal and fantasy private lives, even though this is of absolutely no interest to me sexually whatsoever. I find it repellent. Nonetheless, I was predisposed to think that this was right-wing reactionary overreach. I'm not so sure anymore. You have heard about a book that we're going to talk about today. You've heard about it on social media. You've heard about how it's in school libraries, being given out to children. And you've seen, some of you, video of parents who have brought this book to the attention of the school boards and said, why are you putting child pornography in the high school library? And you've seen parents whisked out of the room when they start quoting the language from this book that we're going to talk about. Here's an example of just one of these. There are many out there, but this one is a gay man in front of I believe, a Florida school board. Take a listen. And I will warn you, the audio is very soft here.
You're out of bounds. It's unlawful what you're doing right now. There is something very concerning that I think just speaks to the whole disorder that's going on in this board. And I'm going to read a passage of a book that's floating around in your schools. It's been banned from many other schools. And as a member of the LGBT community, the fact that, is that fine with you? I'm sorry. The fact that this is floating around for children as young as 9th grade is concerning. A passage from Gender Queer. Fast forward, we've been dating for 2 months. We've made out. We've had sex. We've moved on to sexting at work. I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You are going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your...
Mr. Engels,
Yes.
I appreciate the,
No way.
Well, I'd like to continue reading.
No, we're not
The children
gonna
can
have-
hear
sir,
adults
gonna
can
read
listen.
it. We're gonna read it.
I'm sorry.
I want to have your blank in my mouth.
You're
I
out
want
of
to
order,
give
and
you
if
the
you don't
best
stop now,
blowjob
we'll
of your
remove you
life.
from the
Then I want you
chambers.
inside me.
Remove him from the chambers.
Why?
Yeah, why? You don't
Our kids are reading this. Our kids are reading
If we
this.
can be quiet, I will answer your questions.
Why is your school?
I understand
You allow
that
this
if that
filth.
book is in the classroom, and the language that he just read is inappropriate for this forum.
Then why is it inappropriate for
Excuse
schools?
me, I have the floor. I'm respectful to you when you speak. If you're respectful to me, or we'll take another recess. I understand the contradiction here. This is the first time I've heard of this and the board has heard of this. We will look into the matter, and I do hope that that book is removed. Okay? And if not, we'll be back here having this conversation again.
That's right.
But I can guarantee you, I did not know that book was in the library, and I doubt anybody else.
That's the problem is we
You
don't,
want to be removed from the room.
I don't. I
You
just-
cannot speak out in the meetings. I
whatever.
just commended you guys. I understand this is emotional, but we're going to follow the rules, or we're going to take breaks, and you're going to lose precious time. Let's take our next call.
Okay, that wasn't even the most vitriolic of the videos, and in fact, I'm heartened to hear from that school board member that she had no idea that book was going to be, that book was in the library. And of course, as one of the audience members said, that's the problem. I don't expect every school board member to know everything that's in the library catalog, but I'm glad that they do now know. But honestly, I think they should have let him go. I think everybody in that auditorium should have heard more of the detail of this book that is in public schools in the lending library for children across this country. What is this book? Well, actually, first, before I introduce you to the book, I'm going to tell you where I found it. The Essex, Vermont High School. I've been in touch with a parent who has a child in the high school who was appalled to find this book in the stacks and helpfully secreted that book out of the stacks, checked it out, and now it's in mom's possession. This is right next door to me. This is where I live. This book is called Gender Queer by an author named Maya Kobabe. It's not a comic book, a graphic novel, you see, that's autobiographical. We're going to take a look at the next picture here. I just want to show you that we've done our homework. You can see that the edge of the book is stamped with Essex High School. We'll go to the next picture, and I'll read you the blurb on the back of the book, how it advertises itself. Here's the publisher's copy. In Gender Queer, Maya Kobabe has crafted an intensely cathartic autobiography about air path to identifying as non-binary and asexual and coming out to air family and society. By addressing questions about gender identity and what it means and how to think about it, the story also doubles as a much-needed, useful, and touching guide. You'll see exactly how much of a touching guide it is when we get into the detail. Here's the next picture. I want to show you that it's been in their stacks of this library since at least 2019. It's been checked out 4 times that we know of. But of course, it's sitting in the stacks and can be read by anybody. And you can see that in the next picture we have up here, right out there in the open for any kid in high school. And finally, we confirm that it is indeed in the electronic catalog of the book, along with a surprisingly large number of other books about trans and gender. I'm sure that they're just as wholesome and savory as this one. Aren't you? So we're going to go through these images, and I'm going to read some of the text. I want to tell those of you who are listening to us on audio, thank you very much. This is a good episode to go back and watch the video as well, because this is graphics heavy. And in order to really get what's going on here, frankly, I want you to see this because I want you to be shocked. I'm being completely candid with you. I want you to see this with your own eyes. So if you listen to us, please go back and take a look here. This book is 237 pages long. I'm only going to show you about 22 pages from this book. Let's start our selection. So we've got, it's not very talented comic drawing. I mean, you can tell what things are, but it's really rather crude and amateurish, as so much of this is. And we have a picture of a young person. Oh, wait a minute. I should go back. When I was reading that blurb on the back, yes, I said when air came out to society. These are their pronouns, E-I-R. Not he, not she, not they, not them. Air. It's wonderful to be a gender special. So we have this unidentified young person who might be any sex at all or none, lying back in the grass, thinking to air self. This is a woman, by the way, who wrote this book. Obviously. I was 11 or 12 years old the first time I can remember fantasizing about having a penis. I held a folded handful of grass between my legs. And the image here shows her holding this grass phallus between her spread legs. Safe in the knowledge that if discovered, I could release my imaginary member and it would disintegrate back into the scattered stalks. Hey, butthead. She said member. Next one. Be prepared. We're going to blur out some of the most graphic stuff here, but not everything. Now we have a picture of a shirtless torso and a pair of jeans and a hand holding a bulge in a crotch. And it says, "For years, my standard method of masturbation was stuffing a sock into the front of my pants and manipulating the bulge." Next panel shows two boys or young men naked, showing an ass crack on one of them, face to face, making out. And it says, "This would evolve into hip thrusting while thinking of my latest gay ship." What is a gay ship? Well, if you haven't heard of this before, to ship, the verb to ship, is a contraction of to relationship. And what does that mean? I can't believe I have to talk about this stupid bullshit. It means fantasizing in your head about characters in a popular book or novel and making them have relationships. So if, so for example, when I was a kid and I was a fan of Batman and Robin, and when I got old enough to start having romantic feelings, I shipped Batman and Robin in my head. Like I fantasized that they had some sort of relationship with each other. Except we didn't talk about it. My God, I would have died before I'd admitted that as a child. I'm practically dying admitting it to you now. That's to ship. Next panel shows someone seated in the driver's seat of a car with her hand between her legs. Memorably, I got off once while driving just by rubbing the front of my jeans and imagining getting a blowjob. Next one. This is a series of panels depicting a conversation between the author, this young woman, and another young woman, a friend of hers. They're sitting on a couch and talking back and forth. Oh, and just so you get the visual, the author here, the young woman, has drawn herself. I mean, again, it's not incredibly detailed artwork, so it could plausibly be either a boy or a tomboyish-looking girl, but clearly means to convey that she is male in this character role. So, when I finally got old enough to not be embarrassed talking about this stuff with my sister, so her sister says, it really never occurred to you to put something into your vagina? Not even a finger? No, it really didn't. Sister says, so you've never tasted yourself? What? No. Ew. Yeah, that's right. Ew. Wait, you have? Says our author. Sister, laughingly, like she has a fork full of salad in one hand and she's caught in slow motion. Ha ha! Of course, you should try. Next panel, get a sick bag. And so we have a picture of the author holding up her finger with liquid on it, and it's very helpfully labeled vagina slime. Yes, vagina slime. That's the technical term. I don't know what the kids are calling it these days. Maybe I should go to Essex High School and ask. Next one. We've got 3 more panels of the increasing emotional dysregulation provoked by the vagina slime. You know, I can't help. It's not. It is. Yes, it is funny. God damn it! It's not funny. This is evil, but evil things are often darkly, ridiculously funny. So I'm giving it to you as it comes out of me, friends. Then we move on to a talk about masturbation. Again, I have an extremely low sex drive compared to pretty much all of my friends. As a teen, I got bored of masturbation, so I quit for 6 months. Then we have a panel with a drawing of stacks at the library, appropriately. And it says, at the library, I began to discover more and more queer books. Indeed. I'll bet you did. I'll bet you did. Next page. Remember, 237 pages of this. Including the fake series by Sanami Matto and the Last Herald Maid trilogy by Mercedes Lackey. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with this. The writing is really crap. Both of which include very tame gay sex scenes. I can still recall a specific physical sensation I got from reading these scenes. Then we have a picture of 2 hands holding this book with little electricity crackles running up and down them. And she writes, I felt as if lightning was coming from the pages, electricity flowing directly into my palms. Then we get into erotic dreams that she had in high school. One night after reading Sandman for the first time, I decided to ask Morpheus to send me a good dream. I then dreamed about having a massive, painful boner that lasted all day. And yes, we have a visual depiction of the massive boner in boxer shorts. Another time, I dreamed of waking up with a well-groomed beard. Then we have a picture of the author imagining herself as a virile man with an actual beard looking in the mirror. But when I look closer, my first beard ever, and I'm already going gray. I'm going to cut in here for a second, folks, and point out what's going on here. You need to remember that this is an adult writing this for children. But if this is a reflection of an adult's mind, I see massive mental instability, insecurity, signs of trauma, and disassociation from your body. This is not a healthy mind. This is not a normal maturation process. This isn't coming out as trans or gender queer. This is rolling around like a pig in dirt inside your own mental pathology and thinking that the mental pathology that's causing you suffering is actually your salvation. It's very sad. Next one. Interest in erotic gay fiction has been so prevalent in my friendships, one could mistake it for a prerequisite. Tee-hee-hee-hee. Yeah, I know, all of you young girls out there who call yourselves gay boys, soft boys, ooh-woo. This is just typical, normal teenage girl romantic fantasy gone wrong. You're not gay. You're not boys, soft or otherwise. The rest of that's boring. I'm going to keep going. So in this panel, we've got... Here's some of the disassociation again that I want to point out to you. Last panel on this page, the author writes, I assign sensation to a body part I don't have all the time. Sometimes I can almost feel where it would be resting against my thigh. Trauma, disassociation. Then she moves on to talking about how she read famous comic, lesbian comic Alison Bechdel's Fun Home book, which is for adults, not children. She says, I didn't know then that there was a word for the gratifying motion of rocking back and forth in my chair as I drew at my desk. I discovered it at around the same age, followed by the further realization that my ability to become aroused was governed by a strict law of diminishing returns. And we have a picture of the author fantasizing with an imagination bubble, which she calls an elaborate fantasy based on Plato's Symposium. And what do we have there? We have a drawing of a Greek man and a Greek boy. And the man, they're both erect, and the man is tugging on the boy's penis. The last piece of text on this page, remember the disassociation, remember the trauma. The more I had to interact with my genitals, the less likely I was to reach a point of any satisfaction. The best fantasy was one that didn't require any physical touch at all. That's telling. Now we move on to when the author discovered sex toys and how you could mail order them through comics. And she talks about the first one. She got a $10 bullet vibrator, which is visually depicted. And the thought bubbles that the author gives us for her state of mind looking at this sex toy. The way she talks about orgasms makes me wonder if I've never actually had one. I guess I should get one of these, that is the vibrator, and try it. So, a few weeks later, I bought one. I remember leaning in my bedroom doorway, imagining how good this vibrator was going to make me feel. I got off by pressing the front of my jeans, the unopened box in my hand. Which hand, honey? Both of them have got an unopened box. But when the time came to actually turn it on, I'll try the lowest setting. That's what Erica used in the comic. You see how she's repeating this? Grooming? This is sexual grooming. That's what this is. This is pedophilic grooming. More talk with her sister about the vibrator in more detail than any of us need to pay attention to. Fast forward. Apparently she's got, she has a mate now. So fast forward, we've been dating for 2 months. We've made out, we've had sex, and now we've moved on to sexting at work. It's very adult, isn't it? This is what you want your 9th grader reading? 10th? 11th? 12th? What age is this? When does this become appropriate for public school kids? Here's the content of the sexting. I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You are going to look so hot. This conversation, this sex conversation, is taking place in a public library. The author depicts herself sitting in front of the public terminal in a library. Do you see the boundary breaking going on here? This is not an accident. This is deliberate. This is normalizing the obscene. More the sexting. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside me. And the last panel is the author blushing and saying, this is the most turned on I've ever been in my life. I am dying. The fantasy continues. This is the worst one I saw in this book. There are 3 panels here, and the first 2 depict a blowjob. They have one person standing up, who I would say is a man, except I happen to know that this is supposed to be a depiction of a plastic fake penis or a dildo on a strap being worn by the woman. And kneeling is the author's partner, putting her hand on the phallus and then sticking it in her mouth. Yeah, oh, and by the way, when you see the blurring here, that's us. I didn't want to show that whole thing to you, but there's no blurring in the book, okay? It's just full on right there. Jesus. Only got 2 more here. Pardon. But this is the illustration of the grooming intent here. Think about this person. Think about the fact that she wrote this book where she disgorged private details in a children's book format in a completely inappropriate way that she knew was going to be put in school libraries. Keep that in mind when I tell you this. This is the author talking about herself. The kids I teach are primarily assigned female at birth, and they range in age from 11 to 14. She's a teacher. She's a teacher. Yes, she called them AFAB, assigned female at birth. They're not girls. They were just assigned female. And finally, she has a couple of panels titled, Looking Around My Class Today. Remember, she's the teacher here. Thought bubble coming out of the teacher as she stands in front of the blackboard. I wonder if any of these kids are trans or non-binary, but don't have words for it yet. Next one. How many of them have never seen a non-binary adult? Is my silence actually a disservice to all of them? This is sick. Is my silence a disservice to all of them? Do you believe me now that they're coming for your kids? Is this enough? Is this book in your public school library? Do you know? I think you should check. And I want to talk directly to the Essex, Vermont school district right now, because you're going to be hearing from me. I'm going to make sure that you see this show. I'm going to make sure that you see it on your social media. Here are my questions. Number 1, what was the review process for accepting this book into library circulation? Number 2, who are the staff and faculty that were on the review committee? I want names. Number 3, does the school not recognize this as child pornography? And finally, does the school psychologist have any concerns at all about the glorification of what appears to be trauma-induced body disassociation and mental imbalance? I shouldn't even have asked that question because I'm sure it would be shocking. This is just normal, isn't it? I'm sure the psychologist is very inclusive. Actually, I made a mistake here. I have one final question, and it's this. Essex schools. Are you aware of Vermont statute, subsection 2882, titled Disseminating Indecent Material to a Minor in the Presence of a Minor. If not, let me read it to you. Pardon me, 2802. Here it is. No person may, with knowledge of its character and content, sell, lend, distribute, or give away to any minor any picture, photograph, drawing, sculpture, motion picture film, or similar visual representation or image, including any such representation or image which is stored electronically, of a person or portion of the human body which depicts nudity, sexual conduct, or sadomasochistic abuse which is harmful to minors. Hope you've got a good lawyer. See you after the break. For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.
We now have a bonus for our supporters. You can help the Disaffected podcast grow and receive invitations for our off-air Zoom hangouts by becoming a supporting member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Patreon users, go to patreon.com/disaffected. Subscribestar users, you can find us at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Check out our webpage at disaffected.fm for the complete list of ways you can help support us, and thank you.
Welcome back. If you watch us on video, you should subscribe to us on audio too, because we are good for the car, we're good for the housework, we're good for the Peloton workout that I know so many of you are doing. We are available anywhere you get your podcasts: iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. Click that subscribe button and thank you very much. And one of the reasons to do that is we have a special bonus audio episode. We told you about it last week, but it's still fresh. We have a long-form interview with Sue, a mom of a trans-identified daughter. And the thing that I really like about this one is that although this family is in crisis, they're going to get through this crisis because Sue is a mom with her head firmly screwed on straight, and she's got a good therapist too. So, it's there's some family problems to listen to, but it ends on a hopeful note. So check it out. Check us out on audio. And also, we would love to have your support for the show. This takes money. Doing this takes money. But it's largely a labor of love when you're just starting out and you're two guys like Kevin and I who have full-time jobs. So you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/disaffected. You can also support us on Subscribestar at subscribestar.com/disaffected. And this is a good time to get in because the perk we have for our supporters right now is a donor-only Zoom hangout where we all talk with each other. It's not scripted. It's not recorded. It's off camera. You get to meet each other. We talk. You bring up ideas for the show. You tell me about your backgrounds and your stories with Cluster B. And next month, we haven't scheduled it yet, folks. I will. I'll be doing that over the next couple of days. We're going to have a movie party. We're going to watch Mommy Dearest. So if you have been just waiting for the right time, enter those digits and subscribe now. Thanks. So you've heard me talk and bitch about National Public Radio, and now you're going to get a whole segment of it. Let's talk about NPR. NPR was the only channel I had tuned in my car radio for at least 20 years, maybe 25 years. Been listening since I was a college student. And what it's turned into today, well, I was actually thinking about this as I was getting ready for the show. Like, what is the accurate read on NPR? Did they become ridiculous? Were they always ridiculous? From my point of view, I think they used to be, although always having a liberal slant, I think they used to be a much more professional news outlet. I think you could depend on some of the things they said to be factual much more than today, even if they had a left-leaning tilt. Today, It's an absolute shit show. I think I told you this story on one episode earlier. I did just a sort of experiment one day when I was driving around in the car. I had to be in the car all day, so I said, I'm going to turn on NPR just randomly throughout the day and see what I hear. What topic do I hear coming across? I ended up turning the car radio on and off 7 times from the morning until the evening. Every single time I turned it on, the story was about race and racial equity, not equality, equity. Every time. So it wasn't just the top of the hour news headlines. It was also All Things Considered. It was Morning Edition. It was 1A. It was any other talk show. Every single program, whether it came from an NPR affiliate or NPR headquarters in Washington, was about race. And this is the public broadcaster who has decided to refer to Hispanic people as Latinx, even though surveys have shown that about 3 to 4% of all Latinos in the United States have either heard of Latinx or would use it. Most of them find it ridiculous or outright offensive. But mommy knows best, and nobody mommies like NPR. So we're going to listen to some audio clips. I just took one show. It's a podcast called It's Been a Minute. You hear how down with the youth it is, right? It's been a minute. Urban informed, youthful, fresh, with it. It's been a minute. This is from July 14, 2020. So cast your mind back into the deep, dark recesses of history of last year. President Trump was still in office. COVID was still fairly new. And the entire summer had not yet occurred, the summer of Black Lives Matter riots, although they had begun. So this episode of the podcast, It's Been a Minute, with host Sam Sanders, this one is titled Reckoning with Race in Journalism. Let's take a listen to how host Sam Sanders introduces the topic.
George Floyd was killed on May 25th, 2020. Since then, it seems everything has changed. Protests against police brutality have swept the nation and the globe. All kinds of statues are coming down. NASCAR banned Confederate flags. Aunt Jemima is gone. And one thing that's come out of all of this that has honestly surprised me, it's been this so-called media reckoning on race. For a few weeks now, journalists of color have been speaking out about what it's like to be in newsrooms where they are usually outnumbered.
Usually outnumbered? Isn't that a condition that almost every human goes through in some situation or another? I'm always outnumbered. I'm gay. There's only about 2 or 3% of us, maybe. You don't believe the 1 in 10 thing anymore, do you? I used to, but it's not real. It's not true. And a reckoning that that gets rid of Aunt Jemima. Do you find it ironic that my sense of time is so distorted by this insane world we live in right now. I don't remember if it was last year, the year before, or 3 years ago. All of these companies getting down on their knees and flagellating about how they've been complicit in white supremacy and structural racism have decided that a way to atone for that is to erase the black characters that they've used to sell their products. So Aunt Jemima doesn't exist anymore. They still want to sell their pancake mix and their syrup, but it's not called Aunt Jemima, and we don't get to see that lady anymore. It's now, it sounds like a drag name I'd make up. Do you know what they call Aunt Jemima syrup now? Pearl Milling Company. If that isn't an attempt to kill a brand, I don't know what is. And Uncle Ben, he's gone too. Uncle Ben doesn't get to sell you rice anymore. And the Land O'Lakes Indian Maiden, she's gone too. I bought my first box of Land O'Lakes butter since they got rid of her. And it's the same picture of like a sunny landscape and then but there's just nobody there. There's nobody there to offer you a platter of butter, the spread of my people. This is progress. Okay, let's get back to Sam Sanders and his spiel here. So let's go to the next audio clip. Let's roll the next one. Just take a listen.
And at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, editors banned a black reporter from covering protest because in a tweet, she jokingly compared scenes of so-called looting to country music fans after a concert.
Did you catch that? So-called looting. So-called, Sam? I have a feeling that you saw the same images that the rest of America saw last year. There wasn't anything so-called about that looting. It was looting, Sam. It was breaking store windows. It was stealing merchandise in full view of police who did nothing and are still doing nothing. It was setting buildings on fire. Why is it so-called looting, Sam? Because black people did it? Black people can't do wrong? Because they're a sacred caste, aren't they? Like trans people and like gay people were for a few months till we got pushed aside by the queer brigade. So-called looting. This is National Public Radio, folks. They can't even tell the truth about actual, dare I say it, literal violence that took place on live television. You're going to like the next one. Let's go ahead with it.
But the thing that really kicked this reckoning into high gear, it was when the New York Times published this op-ed from U.S. Senator Tom Cotton.
His piece Wednesday titled, "Send in the Troops," called for an overwhelming show of force.
The op-ed came out on June 3rd, and it called for the military to partner with local law enforcement to crack down on all the protests. A, quote, overwhelming show of force to restore order. Black journalists at the Times thought the piece was a call for violence, and not just against protesters.
The black journalists within the Times newsroom, basically began to tweet that publishing this op-ed puts black New York Times journalists in danger.
Yeah, that's loony talk. Publishing this op-ed puts black Times journalists in danger. They saw it as a call for violence. Was Tom Cotton's editorial saying that the National Guard needed to be deployed to restore order? That is, to stop looting, not so-called looting, but actual looting. To stop the arson, to stop the assaults, to stop the shootings, to stop the trashing of the streets and the making of the streets absolutely dangerous after dark in cities like Minneapolis and many other cities around the country. That was a call for violence. This, my friends, this is the reversal that we're always talking about. The favorite trick of the cluster B mind, the personality disordered mind, the narcissistic mind, whether it's an individual mind or the collective personality disorder that this country is suffering from right now. They reverse the truth. The call to restore order, they call a call for violence. This is exactly the same thing, just scaled up, as the domestic abuser. This is the man who beats his wife and then claims to the police that she abused him. This is what my mother and her husband have done with me. This is what you see in every one of these situations. It's deranged. It's deranged. Good Lord. So I think we have one more before we get some guests in this show, and I'll tell you about them. Let's roll the next audio clip. I think this is Sam too.
For a lot of us, it became untenable after we had to cover the death of George Floyd and report on that video of a black man being choked to death for 8 minutes. On top of that, we are now dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, which is laying bare racial inequities across this country. And quarantine has given a lot of us time to sit and think.
Yeah, too much time, and it's not very much thinking that you've been doing. You've been emoting. You've had plenty of time to emote and preen and posture, but you haven't been doing very much thinking. It became untenable. What became untenable? You were suddenly unable to do your job because distressing things happened in the news and you had to cover it. I was a newspaper reporter. I didn't go as far as most of these people. I was at a small town daily paper, but I covered a lot of distressing things. Murders, suicides. There were all sorts of things that were distressing in one way or another. And yes, some of them actually touched me emotionally in ways that felt a little bit more personal to me. That's real. Journalists are human. But this is just baby talk. This is baby talk. It became untenable for us. So put upon. Let's bring in commentator Soraya Nadia McDonald, who writes for an outlet now called The Undefeated. Because of course she does. Can we put her on the screen, Kevin?
I would say what I want is actual structural change within newsroom leadership. I do not want the equivalent of painting Black Lives Matter on a street in yellow letters, but in a newsroom. It's visible, but that doesn't really solve anything when it comes to pay discrepancies between white male journalists and Black female journalists who do the same job, have the same level of experience, and one is making $30,000 a year more than the other.
Now, she starts out reasonably. I agree with her when she says things like painting Black Lives Matter or similar slogans on sidewalks or putting them up as posters on the wall is just window dressing. She's absolutely right about that. That's not actual change. But what are these structural changes she wants to see happening? That's when she goes off into the weeds. Black female journalists are just automatically paid much less than white male journalists with the same level of experience doing the same job, up to $30,000 less, when they're exactly equivalent and could do exactly the same work. Baloney. Don't believe it. I don't believe it, and I'm not sure if you believe it, Soraya. You know I don't believe it? Because I used to believe in the so-called gender pay gap that feminists are always banging on about. And I did actually believe that there was evidence showing that women who had the same level of education, the same number of years of experience, and performed the same job at the same level of competence were being paid 20 cents, 25 cents less on the dollar than men. But there is no such evidence, because when you actually look at the scholars who have studied this and actually done the arithmetic and controlled for all the variables, that gap almost disappears. It comes within, I think, about 1%. It's not true. So you'll forgive me, Soraya. I don't believe you. Show me the evidence. You'll hear, as we get a little further into this, what this is really about. She has more to say. Let's listen.
The other thing is that you cannot have newsroom leadership that is completely made up of cisgender straight white men.
Or even cisgender straight white women,
or
if
even
we're being honest.
Exactly, or even cisgender straight white women. That power needs to be distributed more equitably.
I can't help myself making faces. Did you hear their snotty tones of voice? You can't have newsroom leaders who are all cisgender straight white males. And then Sam has to pop in like that little dog in the Warner Brothers cartoon. Oh, hey, Spike, do you like me? Do you like me, Spike? Yeah, or cisgender straight white women. Like, what is that? Good God. Listen to cisgender. This is another thing with NPR, you guys. They just assume that anybody listening to them knows what these ridiculous neologisms actually mean. I don't know how many Americans randomly picked out of the background population have heard of cisgender, but it sure as shit isn't a majority. Cisgender straight white males. But they're in a bubble. They don't listen. They don't talk and they don't listen. They don't listen to anybody. One more from Ms. McDonald.
my hope for this reckoning is that there is not one more class of, young, earnest 22-year-olds coming out of journalism school who basically have to go through this really damaging gauntlet where you're constantly sort of questioning yourself and your own worth. And, I think there are a lot of really talented journalists who have been driven from the field because at some point they feel like they have to make a choice between their own mental health or being a journalist.
Really? Driven out of journalism. Driven. It's a choice between being a journalist and their own mental health. They have to face a damaging gauntlet when they come out of journalism school. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to point out her voice again. The vocal fry. It's not just something that some people do randomly. It is very much a vocal affectation of the progressive left and the NPR set. I just hope that in this racial reckoning, we don't have one more class of journalists. You're not Britney, bitch. It goes along with the themes we talk about on the show: infantilization of grown adults and emotional fragility, histrionic emotional inflation of ordinary things like mild distress into trauma that drives somebody away. This is the victim pose. This is the wounded bird camouflage. This is how they evoke pity and sympathy. And if you're one of those people who, unlike me, is charitable first, you are their preferred target, and you are the one that this works on. Mind it. Then we break away. I love this one. Then they go to talk to some other journalists. Journalists of color. I want an audio effect on that. Kevin, can you do that in the editing? Journalists of color. Color. Well, anyway, listen.
My name is John Sepulvero. I'm mixed. I have Mexican, Irish, Indigenous, and Black ancestry. I worked in public media for 15 years. There are tons of horror stories. There was the white woman editor who asked me if I like dog fighting because she, quote, heard my people like dog fighting. There was another white woman editor who told me to smile more around the office because I, quote, have dark features, and those dark features scared herself and other white women around the office.
He's lying. That never happened. They just lie. No white woman. There was this one white woman and then this other white woman. She heard he had, well, first of all, that people have told me that thing I do, the voice that you hear this guy doing when I parody it, that it's a Bay Area accent. It may well be, but he's got it in spades. And this white woman, I had Mexican ancestry, and she'd heard my people like dogfighting, so she asked me if I like dogfighting. No, she didn't. Stop it. Could you smile more because you have dark features and that scares people? Go on, pull the other one. Let's bring in Maria Hinojosa.
People still find it really interesting, Sam, when they're like, I'm like, no, I was the first Latina in the newsroom at NPR ever to step foot who wasn't cleaning it.
Woo.
That was me,
Woo.
right? That was this Latina.
Oh, isn't she precious? Here's another thing they do that nobody comments on because they're afraid to. But I know I'm not the only one who notices it. The NPR journalists who speak a second language or who have a particularly pronounced ethnic name lay on the accent deliberately and exaggerate it. That was this Latina. That was this Latina. Oh, stop it, honey. Stop it. The very first one who wasn't cleaning the place. Maria Hinojosa, I should have introduced her, is the host of a show called Latino USA. It might be Latina USA. I couldn't hear what I was hearing. And part of why she was asked to comment on this is she'd been at NPR for a long time. But she's moving her show, or at that point when this was recorded, she was moving her show from National Public Radio to PRX, which is the Public Radio Exchange. It's a different company. It might be a nonprofit. And because NPR just wasn't good about race, even though apparently they had her show with her as the host. So, well, we'll let Sam Sanders of NPR tell us about how NPR is on race. Take it away, Sam.
And from its founding, NPR has been, well, bad on race. More than 70% of NPR's newsroom is white. And of the sources you hear on NPR's air, those voices, they are more than 80% white.
Guess what? I looked up the statistics after I heard this clip. So he says that more than 70% of the newsroom at NPR is white. Take a guess at what percentage of the United States is white by population. I'll give you a minute. Ding dong. It's 72%, including Latinos. It slices out a little differently if you don't include them. What's the problem, Sam? What's that? Oh, equity means more than proportional representation, right? Yeah, it does. Let's listen to Sam and Maria talk it over with each other.
You know, like, I'm so proud of what you're doing, but also the fact that you have to make your own production company shows that the NPRs and the PBSs and the CNNs in many ways don't get it and can't help people like you tell the stories that you need to tell.
Yeah, I was thinking
know.
about that as I was thinking about our interview, Sam, because my husband calls me a guerrera, a warrior. And then as I was thinking about our conversation, Sam, I was like, well, that's great. I like that. But you know what? I don't want journalists of color to have to be warriors in order to be able to work as journalists.
Just have a job.
Yeah, to be able to work as journalists of conscience who can bring their entire selves into the newsroom, who are going to be seen, who are going to not only be seen and heard, but actually put into positions of power to be the ones who are listening and making the decisions about, yeah, we want that story on the front page. And the headline is going to say that exactly.
There it is. This is about power and control, not about fairness, not about equality, not about equity. This is about power and control. NPR is so awful that she had to move herself to another company. Explain that to me. She was there for years. NPR's carrying this, for goodness sake. Yeah, the headline's going to say exactly this thing. That's not how it works, honey. And you know it's not how it works because you work in a damned newsroom. The editors and the sub-editors, I'm not going to give you a lesson in journalism. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We've got a couple more here to finish this up. The next one is Sam Sanders again.
Kelly McBride, NPR's newest public editor. I wanted to talk with her about one particular part of this entire debate. The way in which we've been taught as journalists to do our jobs that at a most fundamental level leads to systemically racist outcomes. I am talking specifically about the idea of journalistic objectivity. This idea that reporters only report the facts, they keep themselves out of the story, and they eliminate all bias in their coverage. A lot of folks say, well, that only works if you're a man, and straight, and white.
Really? Journalistic objectivity and the way that journalists are taught how to do their jobs leads to systematically racist outcomes. Because the only people for whom objectivity works are straight, cisgender, white men. Oh, Lord. And we'll take a listen to Kelly McBride here, but I want you to notice something when we do, especially those of you watching. You know, we're putting the picture of these people up there. Take a look at Kelly McBride when we put her up here, and then think of Oregon Governor Kate Brown and see if you don't notice the similarity. So Kelly McBride is the new public editor. That just means ombudsman. Let's hear what she has to say.
I think now what is required to speak to the serious systemic issues being raised in this reckoning is going to have to be an acknowledgement that the movement toward righting these wrongs, it's going to be in some ways painful, and you should do it anyway.
Yeah.
From your conversations with newsroom leaders across the country, do you think they're ready to even accept that idea that this might hurt, that it might not just be a statement and everyone shakes hands and says, sure, good?
No. I mean, nobody wants to voluntarily sign up for something painful.
Yeah.
You do it because you know that what comes on the other side is worth it. There's individuals in every single newsroom who are part of the problem.
Yeah.
And somebody has to tell those people that if they want to keep their jobs, they have to stop being part of the problem. And that means that they're either going to have to be quiet or they're going to have to change.
Somebody has to tell these people that if they want to keep their jobs, they have to stop. They have to be quiet. They have to stop being part of the problem. They have to change. Speaks for itself, doesn't it? Look at her. That's HR Karen gone mad. We're all being ruled by Karen and Caitlin from Human Resources. Well, that's enough for me, and I hope it's enough for you folks. That's the show. And happy Thanksgiving. I'll see you next week. For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.